Welcome everybody to Parent with Purpose. We're back today and we're still on the same topic of human trafficking. And we have a special guest today that I'm very proud to announce is my daughter. But she has been through quite a journey in her life, and it is concerning the human trafficking. So we'd really like you to stay tuned and understand that this can happen to anybody, and we're going to figure out how and why through Samantha's story. Really? So you and I both know the story, but we're going to kind of try to let the audience understand what human trafficking is, how it happened to you, and how we can hopefully educate people so that this doesn't happen to other girls who are unsuspecting of it, and or to give some release to some guilt some people might be feeling because they got caught up in it and didn't know.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with your story. What's the first thing that kind of happened that started this ball rolling?
So what I'm going to do is basically go through what needs to be present in order for there to be human trafficking, just to kind of relay that information, because that was something I wasn't aware of. Therefore, I didn't know that I was involved in human trafficking. So there has to be force, fraud, coercion, and facilitated by a third party. Now, to me, what I was doing, I considered to just be sex work, because at the time I didn't realize that those were the things that were present, and that's what human trafficking is.
Okay.
So for me, I was kind of a rebel teenager, as you know, so I was always on the wrong side of the train tracks doing things that I probably shouldn't have done. One of the things that I did was I went to a party with only one person that I knew, and I ended up getting date raped at the party by multiple people. I then found out a couple months later that I was pregnant. Decided to keep the baby, so I have a 10-year-old son now. So that kind of went downhill for me though. So even though I decided to keep the baby and I was very happy about that, I ended up losing a lot of my friends, a lot of my support through my friends, because they either didn't believe me because I used to lie and steal all the time. The friends that I did lose, thank God, because they were the crowd of people I was hanging around with that weren't necessarily leading me down the right path to begin with. So at the time, I didn't see it that way. At the time, it was my whole life is gone, I've lost all my friends, and you just kind of feel closed off at that point.
Okay, so then what happens next?
So later on, after my son had been born, I had started seeing this guy, and he was super nice, super sweet, interested in all the same things as me, or so I thought. At the beginning, it was like I was wearing rose-colored glasses. It was always like, you're the best, you're so beautiful, you're so kind, you're so nice, I love you, I want to build a life with you, and I already told him all of my hopes and dreams and goals and stuff, and that's where the stages of human trafficking actually come into play. So not the stages I was talking about before, those aren't stages, but the force, fraud, and coercion, that's not a part of this. It's like the luring, the gaming, the grooming stages. So this was in the luring stage where he's, trying to gather information from me about what it is that I want to do with my life, where I want to be, what my hopes and dreams are, and so on and so forth. So I'd already told him all of those things. And then when it got to the point that we were sleeping together and we were sexually active, it would then come down to, that wasn't so amazing. So here's $20, go treat yourself, or let's go get your nails done or your hair done, or let's go take you shopping. I know you were eyeballing that new phone, maybe we should get you a new phone. So that's where the grooming and the gaming stage then comes into play, because they then start to brainwash you and manipulate you into thinking that when I have sex or I'm sexually active with my partner, I then get a reward for it. And it always starts off with something smaller and then turns into something bigger, and then it gets to the point where it's, okay, here's $40, go treat yourself. And they're not taking you out anymore, it's just, here's the money. So now your brain's associating any sort of sexual contact with money.
This gentleman that was in your life started doing that. Was he aggressive?
At the beginning, no, he was not aggressive at all. He was very kind, like I said, and you sit there and think, oh, this is almost too good to be true. Why would you question anything else or think that this person could end up being this person? Or you don't even look at the small things that they do. And now looking back, I see the way that he had talked to other people and sometimes how he talked to me, and then I felt like I was walking on eggshells around him. And at the time, you don't really think that way, like, oh, well, that was an aggressive tendency that I didn't notice. How did I not notice that? And that's because at the time, he was providing everything for me. He was paying for all my stuff, all of my child's stuff. He was essentially my support system at that time.
And what dream was he providing for you? Because you had mentioned that.
Yeah,
so.
And my dream was to have a big family. Like, I grew up with a sister, 2 brothers, and 2 loving parents, and that's what I wanted to have. He knew that I wanted to have a house on the lake, and that was going to take a lot of money because that's not cheap. But it was just, you know, the small basic dreams like that. But to me, they were big, and he knew that. So to him, he was playing
being a single mom.
Yeah, so he was playing the, you know, father figure role. So that's how he got me. And then for me thinking, well, when we get into arguments, or he'd be like, well, you were out later than you were supposed to, or I'm not picking you up now because I don't believe where you are. At the time, I kept thinking, well, this is my fault. He's upset with me, so it has to be my fault because I'm not upset with him, and everything was so good before. Now it's going downhill. What did I do wrong? So you're walking on eggshells around that person and trying to do something for them to make them feel better again, which usually then ends up leading into just doing some sort of sexual act. And then they're like, oh, that was amazing. Here you go. Here's $40 again. And then you're like, okay, everything's better now. Everything's fine. So it always comes back to that.
With you.
Yes, a very vicious cycle. And at the time, again, you're not thinking that it's their fault or that they have aggressive tendencies, or you're just thinking, I did something wrong because he's never like this.
So where did the force come in?
I wouldn't necessarily say there was a lot of physical force, and there usually isn't in human trafficking because they don't want to damage the product. It was very hidden in the shadows, whereas it'd be like, oh, well, I know you really want to have this house, and I know you want to have more kids, and you want to have that big family life. We could do that if you go and do this. It's only for a short period of time. You only have to do it for a little bit. We'll make a lot of money, and then you can get out of it, and we'll have everything that you and I have been hoping and dreaming for. And they also try to use it to spin your hopes and dreams and turn them into their hopes and dreams, so that you feel like you're letting them down too if you don't do it. Instead of just, oh, well, now I'm giving up on my dream. It's, I'm giving up on our dream.
Right.
Right? Explain a bit about how that all worked. So to me, it was, I was told one thing, said, and I'm not going to get into the details, but I was told that, oh, this is all you have to do. Everything's clean, everything's checked, don't worry about it. You never have to worry about who's coming. We'll always let you know and know what's going on. So I figured, okay, this will be great. Like, I can make my own hours. I can, you know, do it around my time. I can decide how much money I'm making, what I want to do, what I don't want to do. And that, if that is what you're doing, that is considered sex work. But that's what I was told I would be doing. But then when it was facilitated by the third party, meaning then it was through people that he knew, it was, we'll post your ads, we'll make the appointments. And that was pretty much all I was told. And I was like, okay, we'll just tell you where to be. They had asked me too, well, what are some of the things you're comfortable with doing? And I told them. But then to find out later that people are arriving and saying, well, I was told you do this. I don't do that. And then there was twice where I made the person leave. And then I was contacted and said, okay, well, I guess you're not working for 2 more weeks. Well, why not? Well, because we need you to do these things. If you can't do these things, then you owe us back all the money that you've made, or you take 2 weeks off, don't make anything, and come back ready and willing to do these things.
Ouch.
And that's where a lot of the, more so the force came in. Some of it was from him as well, but as soon as I got into it, it wasn't really controlled by him other than the money, because the money went to me and then I had to give it to him, which was then he kept in a safe. I didn't know the code for it, and if I needed money, I had to ask him for it in order to go out and buy things or whatever. And then again, it was the questions, well, why do you need $40? You know, baby wipes only cost $20. Here's $20. So I'd have to constantly say, well, I need to go get groceries and do this and this and this. And then he would say, well, I can do all these things. You don't need to touch the money. We're supposed to be saving it. And if I argued with him, like later towards the end, when things started really going downhill and I realized, like, this is not what I should be doing, this is not the person I want to be with, then I would fight him back a little bit more and say, like, no, like, I need that. You're going to give it to me. I'm the one that made the money. I don't see why you're controlling it. And then the anger it just escalated from there to the point where then there was a couple times he was aggressive with my son. And that's when I was like, that's it.
So how did you get out?
So I was actually in it for a couple weeks after I had left him, just because I was still in contact with the third party facilitators. And honestly, it was just through my moral beliefs. It was, you know what, this is not something I'm comfortable with doing. Nothing's changing. This is not what I was told I was going to be doing. I'm not okay with this. And I just left. I stopped contacting them. They came to my place a couple times, or were knocking on the door, and then they just kind of left me alone after that.
So a lot of people who actually, I mean, the dream is what they're selling you, and a lot of people need to have those dreams replaced in order to get out of it. How did you overcome that? Because obviously you didn't get that dream.
I did get the dream. I'm not quite on a lake, but...
Now, but you didn't at the time,
But
right?
at the time, no. So for me, it was, I'd rather starve myself and not have to worry about going and doing these things, because it got to the point where even waking up in the morning and putting on makeup, I felt like I was going to go do that job. And I was like, this is not who I am, who I want to be. And to me, it was worth it to be broke and struggling and go on welfare for the help for a little bit, so Ontario works, instead of continuing to do that.
Your moral code and the fear for your child is kind of really what motivated you to get out of this.
Yeah.
And you did it, and now you are living the dream. So now you're married.
Yep.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So what advice would you actually give somebody who's watching that is either in it, maybe not aware that they're in it, or to parents? So can you kind of sum all of this up?
So my first thing is for parents, because I think parents will notice it before kids will, depending on how close, again, your relationship is with your kids. Some of the things to look out for, just like little red flags even, is like if you're somebody who goes in and does your kids' laundry, if you notice hotel pens in their bedroom or in their backpacks or in their purses, if they're carrying around purses, that's a big sign, because what 13, 14 to 17-year-old needs to go to a hotel? Like, if you know they just went downtown Toronto and spent the weekend there and they stayed with a group of friends, then I mean, that's understandable. But things like that, if your child has lingerie, if all of a sudden they're not hanging out with the same group of friends, or they're now starting to hang out with a not so great group of friends, or they have a boyfriend who, and again, the boyfriend is usually around the same age. So it looks like a real relationship, and that's what they do. So just watching for like, okay, well, she's now spending more time with him and she's staying away from her friends. She's now going out like Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, doesn't come home until Sunday night, and you'll start to notice a lot of life changes. Like if there's somebody who's interested in sports, all of a sudden they're not interested in that. They'd rather be going out and partying. And again, these could all just be teenager things, going through the hormones, going through the stages. But again, it's also things to look out for. And I think having a conversation with your kids about human trafficking is the first step, so that they then see red flags as they're appearing if they're with somebody. Because you're not going to be with your child and their boyfriend. Vice versa. I'm speaking very biasly here. It could be, you know, a woman trafficking a guy as well. But for the most part, what we see is males trafficking females, for the most part. But it does happen. Just letting them know so that they can start to look for red flags, saying like, well, you know, this does seem too good to be true, and I'm not really fond of his friends. They seem like, you know, sketchy people. Or, you know, now he's starting to get more aggressive, or now he's asking me to do things sexually like that I'm not comfortable with.
So hopefully
they'll start to see them if they've already had this conversation and understand what human trafficking looks like.
Right.
And again, they could misinterpret it and just, you know, their boyfriend then just later on shows his true colors and, you know, is just a downright a-hole. So it's all very gray. Because they're very good at making it look like a real relationship, and that's the hardest part.
I have stopped this to interject for just a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to let you know that there is tons of resources down below. Please check them out. All kinds of services that are out there for the families as well as for the victims. And if you would ever like just to reach out to me, please feel free to contact us, and you can tell me that it needs to be anonymous. Second, I'd like you to understand we are a regular suburban family, very close-knit, faith-based, always was very involved with our kids in their lives, and yet this still happened to us because somebody found the one thing my daughter wanted that I couldn't provide for her. It is important that we have these open dialogues with our kids. Lastly, I wanted to ask you a question. At what age do you think it's appropriate to start talking to your kids about this? And the reason I'm asking this question to the whole audience is because I'd like to hear your back and forth on this, because I think that's one of the questions as parents we're going to have with this. And so I want to give you that resource of hearing other people's opinions on this. Okay, and so to somebody who's watching this, who's in the middle of this, what do you...
For somebody who's been approached and think that it is, I mean, go to somebody who's an adult, go to a police officer if you feel comfortable with that. That's your best option. But I mean, for somebody who's already involved in it and is now just realizing, like, this is what I'm involved in, if you want to get out, I'm not telling anybody what to do, because I know how hard it is to get out. And for a lot of people, they didn't have the support system I had. Like, I had a really good family and I had some very close friends as well that you guys helped me out, you loaned me money, you helped me move, you did a lot of stuff for me. And I know a lot of those girls don't have that. So for them, their trafficker is their life. So for me to say walk away from your life, that's not necessarily fair. But it is a good thing to understand that there are support systems out there. So victim services is amazing. I actually volunteer with them, and they've done nothing but great things, and they will actually help women get out of it, finding them shelter, supporting them with food, clothing, anything that they need. There's a great human trafficking support staff at victim services that's dedicated solely to that, and they literally tell them every single time, I'm not telling you to leave, but if you need anything at any time, here's my number. And that's what the human traffickers do, is I'm your support system, I will give you anything at any time, with clauses. But because that's all they've known, they stick with it. So that's why they come in, victim services, and say, anything you need, anytime, to the point where they've even driven out to Niagara Falls to pick up a girl and bring her back home and find her a shelter for the night. A huge step to take, again, which is why it's so difficult, but there are resources out there, and there are shelters, and there is Ontario Works. If you don't have another job or don't have other income to help support you, you can go on that to help you out for the short-term period. Like, I used it for about 6 or 7 months just to help me save up enough money to get going and pay for my rent and groceries and everything else on top of that still, and to save up money for daycare, because that's a big thing. I'm not sure how many other girls involved in human trafficking right now have kids, but that's another big thing. It's, I'm being supported, and so is my child. I can't support my child on my own, and that, I believe, would be even more difficult for people to then be like, well, if I leave this, I have nothing.
Right.
And I can't do that to my child, right? So it's more so just the fact of people understanding that there is options out there and there is help, but a lot of people aren't even aware. Like, half the time I go and talk at schools and I tell them, how many of you know what victim services is and what we do? I see maybe 1 or 2 hands out of like a crowd of 300 people. So if, you know, our youth aren't even aware of it, I mean, how many adults who are involved in human trafficking do you think are aware of the supports and the help that they can actually get? Both personally, that a lot of these girls don't have that support, but I also believe that there are some girls who are being targeted and who are being trafficked right now that have really good family support systems, and all the trafficker needs to do is find out that one thing that's missing in their life. So it could just be something as simple as, you know, you have a really good family, but you've never heard, I'm proud of you, because the older sibling was the one that was the high achiever and doing all of these things, and, you know, maybe you weren't the greatest in school, so you didn't hear those things from your parents, and then your trafficker comes around and says, like, I'm proud of you, and all of a sudden that's what got them. So it doesn't have to be something as big as, well, you want to buy this house, right, so we need to do this now and make a lot of money. It could just be something as simple as, I'm proud of you. And for them, it's even harder to leave, because it's not more so now a money situation, it's
Emotional.
It's an emotional situation where I'm being fed what I need emotionally. Physically, I know that I could go out and get a job, but this person loves me so much and is so proud of me, and I've never had that. Why would
So as a parent of somebody who's been through this, what our goal is to try to really educate everybody out there. The teenagers who, I know their brain, you know, isn't working right, emotional stuff is happening. It happens to all teenagers, and it doesn't make them bad human beings. It makes them a regular teenager, but they need your guidance, they need your love. They need you stepping in as a parent and having those hard conversations with them and making sure that they understand that you are there for them. And the one thing that I think I've figured out from all of this, which I don't know that I said enough of as raising my kids, is that you need to tell your kids that you love them no matter what. So if you find out your family is in something like this or something else, drugs, who knows what else, make sure your kids know you love them no matter what, and that you'll be there to help them. And that in and of itself, I think, would be something that would allow your kids to then start having an open conversation with you, and hopefully stop them from getting down a path in any situation, drugs, human trafficking.
You got a little something right there.
Yeah, and any of those things. I think it's really important that we constantly keep an open dialogue going with our children about all the things that we are learning. And Samantha, I love you.
I love you too.
And our relationship will never change because I love you. And we want to thank you, as always. Have an awesome day.